And sometimes it's trial and error and while you're getting to know a guy. And sometimes, you step over that line with certain guys and they can't handle it. And it kind of blows up in your face. And then you got to go clean up the mess. But that's just part of it. Right.
Yep.
And I was never somebody that was going to yell and scream at you, call you names. I mean, that's just not who I ever was or want to be, but it was intense. And if you didn't walk through the door ready to go, it wasn't going to, you remember the red door, like when you walk through the red door, like you had to be ready. And there were times when certain guys weren't ready and it didn't work out for them, like you had to have a certain mentality to do what we did on a daily basis. But in terms of coaching guys individually, I really believe you got to build relationships and you got to figure guys out and you got to know what works, what doesn't, how hard you can push someone, who you can use as an example. There were certain days I remember doing this with Jalen McFerrin, Jay Flores, Isaiah I mean, these guys that were tough guys that you could coach hard, right? I remember telling Jalen before one practice, I said, hey, listen, I don't know what you're going to do in practice today, but there's going to be a point where I come after you, right? I am going to come after you and it's going to be loud and intense. And I'm doing that so that everybody sees how you're supposed to handle that. Because I knew he would handle it well, but it took it took some doing that sometimes, and setting the example of or the demand of what you wanted, the type of effort you wanted, and then holding guys accountable. And you just had to find different ways to make sure everybody rose to that level. But yeah, you definitely have to find what works for each guy.
And taking the time to explain, like I said, giving a guy a heads up you're going after him is certainly different than a guy getting blown up over, his shoelace being untied for 5 seconds.
Yeah, well, and like a guy like Jalen McFerrin and Isaiah Brooks, I mentioned Jay Flores, and those were some of our Mike Rosa, just great point guards, right? That were tough guys and they could be coached and they could take it. And but yeah, you give them a heads up. You knew they were going to handle it right regardless. But when you give them a heads up and they know it's coming, well, then they really handle it right.
Then they're really on point. Like they know what they're about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you go back and you maybe have to jump another guy and he starts pouting. And you saw what I did with Jalen yesterday, right? And now that's how you're going to respond to. I mean, so we try to find all these little tricks in our coaching bags, but in terms of coaching guys, it's really about finding what works and what motivates and what inspires different people, just like in anything.
And there's a lot of the, to me, effect that pushes forward. I mean, I talk about it a lot, but when you are affected by positive leaders and coaches, that leads, leaders create better leaders, create, the trial and error that you would have to kind of figure it out. It's the role models, it's all those things. So from your leadership, a lot of great leaders have been built and taught and are off now coaching. I mean, you mentioned Jay, just, had him on season 2 here and he's off coaching with Coach Cobb, and with all the relationships you formed and the people that you've been able to affect, there is, tons and tons for you to be proud of. Like you said, missing the relationships. When you look back at the things that didn't go right, or the things maybe in the career like that you would say, I would do that differently, or games that you were, is there a few moments where you're like, all right, that's a moment where I learned from it, but if I could go back, I would do this differently? And
I don't think there's anything that I would really specifically look at and say I would do this differently. I feel like I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I mean, when you're coaching or teaching or doing anything with people, you're going to make mistakes. And so there are many things that I could probably think of or that could come to mind in terms of, well, I did that wrong with this guy, or I didn't communicate the right way with him. So I know that there's a lot of that, but I don't have any regrets or look back and say, oh, I wish I would have done, this big picture stuff anyway, done that differently. We had a vision, and the vision, we tried our best to make that vision perfect. It wasn't always perfect, but we got pretty close. And it was really about just the communication, holding people accountable for the vision. In terms of looking back and I wish I would have, I think the only thing I wish I would have done differently is find a way to enjoy the success more. After that first championship in 2012, I thought, well, maybe might be the only time we ever do this, right? But I enjoyed it, but I don't think I enjoyed it enough. I think as soon as the season ended, we started recruiting again. It was like, okay, well, we have to do that again, right? We went to the NCAA tournament. We won a game. First NCAA tournament game Chico's had won, right? Well, we got to do that again. Okay. And then in 2014, we won our first West Region championship. And if you would have told me we would have won a West Region championship when I took the job, just based on the way the job is set up from scholarships and staffing, I would say, oh, come on. You're crazy, right? Well, we win that one in 2014, and we enjoyed it for a couple days, but then it was like, okay, we got to do that again, right? And so you just keep putting so much more pressure on yourself.